In this short video, I just want to introduce a new term and a new way of looking at price and wave analysis. And we are now looking at the head and shoulders pattern, which is basically just another way of visualizing and talking about those transitioning periods where price goes from making lower lows and lower highs to then making higher highs and higher lows. And I just want to introduce the head and shoulders because I will use the head and shoulders pretty often during this course and also in my trading, and so that we are on the same page, you are not confused by the terms that I use. And so let's get started. And a head and shoulders is, as I said, a transitioning period or a transitioning pattern, both to the upside and to the downside. Usually the head and shoulders is drawn at the market top, but there are also inverse head and shoulders at market bottoms. So a head and shoulders always has three parts to it. The first one, or the major one, is the head, which is the lowest low or the highest high of a transitioning period. And then to the left and to the right of the head there are shoulders, the left shoulder and the right shoulder. And let me just mark that and then it will become clear. So here is the head and shoulder symbol. You can also get it here. You should give this a star because we will need it quite often, and then it will appear in your access bar. So we grab the head and shoulders and then we click here, and you can see now we have the left shoulder that we can place somewhere. So here is the left shoulder, our head is here, it is the lowest low, and the right shoulder is then the transition where price is then making the first higher low. And so you can see the head and shoulders basically just describes and is just another way of looking at those transitioning periods. And another very important point about the head and shoulders is that there's something that we call the neckline. Usually it is drawn by using the previous swing highs in this point on the left shoulder and the right shoulder. So here we grab this high and this high, so that could be considered a neckline. Sometimes it is not as steep, but it does not really matter, and you just want to get a feeling for when is this pattern and this transitioning period broken. We don't necessarily need the trend line and the neckline in our trading because, as I said, we are looking at those transitions where price is then suddenly making a higher high on an upside reversal. So you can see that here we are making lower lows and lower highs during the downtrend. Then here at the bottom something was suddenly changing. Here we then broke with this candle above the previous swing high. Here then we confirmed that we were also making a lower low, so we have a higher high here, we have a higher low here, and then here again we start the new uptrend with the first higher high, the second higher high. So you can see at the bottom of such a pattern there is the head and shoulders, and then we just wait for the transition period. And as I said, the head and shoulders is just a way of talking about transition periods and having a way of describing such a pattern. Again, here's a very similar pattern. You can see that the head, and then here is the left shoulder, the right shoulder. So again, we grab our head and shoulders tool, we click here, we have the head, we have the left shoulder, now we have the head, and we have our right shoulder. And again, this was the example in our previous video. So we wait until price is here breaking above the previous resistance, where we are then making a higher high. Here we are then retesting it, and again at the bottom of this pattern is the head and shoulders. Let's look at another example. And head and shoulders are not always textbook, and it's very important that you're not only looking at textbook examples, because then when you are making your real trading decisions, when you are not seeing the textbook patterns, then you will become confused and you're not really prepared for live trading. So here is another way of looking at head and shoulders. You can see here we have been in an uptrend very nicely. Then here we have our transition period. We go from making higher highs and higher lows to then suddenly making lower highs and lower lows. You can see that here price was barely breaking higher here. Here we had some type of a consolidation, but at the same time, although price was not being able to make a higher high at this point here, you can see this high is lower as that point. We never really broke here below the previous swing low, so we never really made a lower low. You can see price was still making higher lows, so the trend structure was still working, although you can already see that here price was not able to push high higher as easily. So that was the first indication. And then here we move into the top. You can see our head is this one. The left shoulder is in this case a little bit more of a consolidation. You can see when I move this away a bit, you can see here we have our left shoulder, which is not a classic trend pattern. You can see we moved higher, we just drifted sideways. We didn't have a full retracement against the trade or against the trend direction, but it's not necessary. We can see here just a consolidation again here. Then this is the final exhaustion push, which is immediately reversed here with the next candle. And then here we have the right shoulder, a very deep retracement, a very deep turnaround after this market top, after this exhaustion push. So you can see already that something here is changing in the market dynamics. Again, we're just looking at highs and lows, trend waves, retracements, and we can get so much information out of our charts, out of the markets. And we can see that something is changing here. The exhaustion move, the very deep retracement here. Let me get rid of that. And then we can also see that here is a very important zone. You can see lots of previous swing lows in that area. We were never really able to break lower. Here we moved into that. We still found support. We were not able to break lower. We moved higher. We made the right shoulder at that point. Now we are confirming a very strong change in the direction, but we are still missing the final piece to the puzzle, which is then the break of this level, which then confirms that we are making lower lows again, or as well. Here you can see another failed breakout attempt, and now it is very interesting. You can see here this trend wave into the opposite direction is immediately rejected. We make lower lows here now, the second lower low here after the right shoulder, and then here finally we get a very strong momentum shift. This is a pattern that we will cover later in our foundation as well. And you can see here then this foreshadows this very nice reversal after this uptrend here. And you can see, although we are just getting started, we have already a lot of insights and ways of making sense of charts, and that is how we can use wave analysis, trend analysis, head and shoulders, looking at retracements, pullbacks, and then we can start putting it slowly together. And so that is a quick introduction to the head and shoulders. We will talk about that later in more detail and combine it with other tools, but that is for now good enough and a good starting point. And so we are now ready to move on to our next lesson. We have covered quite a bit about trend waves, and then we will learn how to find key areas on our charts, key price levels where the chances of finding such a high probability reversal can even be greater, and we can increase our chances of finding good transition periods with those concepts as well. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next